The scratch on my arm was still bleeding when I finally understood what 450 days of silence really meant. He wasn't growling because he hated me. He was growling because every human who'd ever gotten this close had taught him to expect pain. I stood there, frozen, watching Neo cower in the corner of his concrete cell at Atlanta Humane Society, while the shelter volunteer Dorothy told us what she told everyone. Most people leave now. Most people see the fear and call it aggression. Most people decide a dog like this isn't worth the risk. 450 days. That's how long he'd been waiting for someone to prove him wrong about humans. My wife Lisa squeezed my hand. I looked at the blood dripping down my wrist, then back at the shattered animal trembling against the cold kennel wall, and something in my chest cracked wide open. His fear wasn't a warning. It was a question, one nobody had ever stayed long enough to answer. Most people would have scrolled past by now, just like every family who walked past Neil's kennel for 450 days straight. But you're still here. You see the dog behind the fear. If you believe overlooked animals deserve patient eyes, hit subscribe right now and tell us where you're watching from in the comments, because this community is how stories like Neo's finally reach the hearts that need to hear them. But to understand why that moment changed everything, you need to see where it all started, in a silent kennel on Howell Mill Road, where hope had gone to die. 3 weeks before the scratch, before the growling, before I understood what 450 days of silence really meant. Lisa and I drove down Howell Mill Road on a Sunday morning, searching for something to fill the quiet that had swallowed our home on Peachtree Street. 7 years married, good years, stable years. But somewhere along the way, the rooms got too still, dinners too silent. We didn't fight anymore. We didn't laugh much either. Maybe a dog, Lisa had said one night, scrolling through adoption photos. Something easy, something that needs us. I agreed, because agreeing was easier than admitting we needed something too. The Atlanta Humane Society smelled like bleach and desperation. Kennels lined the walls, each holding hopeful eyes, wagging tails, paws pressed against metal, begging for attention. Dogs barked, dogs whined, dogs performed their hearts out for every stranger who passed. Except one. At the far end of the corridor, past the puppies and the photogenic retrievers, a single kennel sat in shadow. No barking, no movement. Just a shape curled so tightly against the back wall, it barely looked like a dog at all. I almost walked past. Lisa stopped. "Jonathan," her voice dropped to something fragile. "Look." The information card was faded, edges curling from months of neglect. I squinted to read it. Neo, male, 3 years old, days in shelter, 450. Underneath, scrawled in red ink, previous owner surrendered, history of abuse, unapproachable. 450 days, in this place of constant noise and concrete floors, with that word stamped on his door like a death sentence. I looked through the chain link. He didn't look up, didn't flinch, didn't acknowledge we existed. His ribs pressed against dull, matted fur. His eyes stared at nothing, flat and empty, like something inside had switched off long ago and never found a reason to turn back on. We'd come looking for something easy. Easy wasn't curled in that corner. But something in the way he refused to look at us, refused to even hope, made it impossible to look away. "Can we meet him?" Lisa asked quietly. A voice behind us answered. Most people don't ask twice.
The voice belonged to a woman with tired eyes and a lanyard that read Dorothy, volunteer. She stood behind us with her arms crossed, not unwelcoming, just cautious, like she'd seen this exact scene play out 100 times and knew exactly how it ended. "Everyone stops at his kennel," Dorothy said. "They read the card, they feel sorry for him, then they move on to the golden retriever 2 doors down." Lisa didn't move. "We'd like to meet him." Dorothy studied us for a long moment. "He won't come to you. He won't look at you. He might growl if you get too close. Last family that tried said he was broken beyond repair, left after 10 minutes. "We're not them," I said, though I wasn't sure why. Dorothy unlocked a small side room connected to Neo's kennel, a visitation space with a concrete floor and a single plastic chair. "Sit. Don't approach him. Don't reach for him. Just exist. Let him decide if you're worth acknowledging." We sat on the cold floor, backs against the wall. Dorothy cracked the kennel gate open just enough for Neo to enter if he chose. He didn't. For 45 minutes, nothing happened. Lisa held my hand. The shelter noise faded to white. Neo remained curled in his corner, a motionless shadow, refusing to engage with a world that had only ever hurt him. I was about to suggest we leave when it happened. Neo lifted his head, not much, just an inch, just enough to turn his muzzle slightly in our direction. His eyes, God, those eyes, flickered toward us for half a second before dropping back to the floor. Dorothy's breath caught behind the glass. "He hasn't done that in 3 months," she whispered. Lisa's grip tightened on my hand. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know if it meant anything at all. But something in that fractional movement, that tiny acknowledgement of our existence, felt like watching a corpse twitch. Like somewhere deep inside that broken animal, something was still fighting to survive. "Can we come back tomorrow?" Lisa asked. Dorothy looked at us differently now. Not cautious, something closer to confused. "If you want, but don't expect miracles. Dogs like him don't just decide to trust again. Most of them never do." Lisa stood, brushing dust from her jeans. "Then we'll keep coming until he decides we're worth trusting." I wanted to tell her that was unrealistic, that we'd come looking for easy, that this dog might be exactly what his card said, unapproachable, broken, beyond saving. But I couldn't stop thinking about that small lift of his head, that fraction of a second where his eyes had met ours. It felt like a question, one I wasn't ready to answer yet. We came back the next day, and the day after that. By day 3, Neo had learned to recognize our scent. I could tell because something shifted when we entered, a tension in his shoulders, a subtle flattening of his ears, awareness. But awareness wasn't trust. On day 4, Lisa moved too quickly. She shifted her weight to stretch her leg, a simple motion, completely unconscious. Neo's reaction was immediate. He scrambled backward, pressing himself so hard into the corner that I thought he might push through the concrete itself. And then the growl came, low, guttural, a sound that started somewhere deep in his chest and vibrated through the air like a warning siren. I froze. "Lisa!" "Don't move." Her voice was steady, even as her eyes stayed locked on Neo's bared teeth. "Don't look at him directly. Just breathe." Dorothy appeared at the window, her face tight with something I recognized as resignation. "This is where most people leave," she said quietly. They hear that sound and decide he's aggressive, dangerous, beyond help. He's not aggressive. He's terrified. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and saw something I hadn't seen in years. Purpose. The woman I'd married had been fading into routine, but here, on this cold concrete floor with a growling dog pressed against the wall, she was suddenly alive again. "Jonathan," Dorothy's voice pulled my attention, "you should know, the last volunteer who tried to push past this point ended up with stitches. I'm not saying he's vicious. I'm saying his fear makes him unpredictable." Neo's
Is it
growl
always this
faded
slow?
to a whimper.
Progress is slow,
His
but
body
it does come.
trembled.
It's hard to keep believing. I
"He
know.
thinks we're going to hurt him," Lisa whispered. "Every human in his life has hurt him. Why would we be any different?" I wanted to argue. I wanted to say we'd done enough, tried enough, that some dogs were just too damaged. But I looked at Neo, really looked, and saw what Lisa saw. Not aggression, protection. A creature so profoundly wounded that the only defense he had left was to push everyone away before they could hurt him first. "We're not leaving," I told Dorothy. "Not yet." She didn't argue, just nodded slowly and wrote something on her clipboard. "I'll note that you've been warned." Neo watched us through hollow eyes, still trembling, still pressed into his corner. But he didn't look away this time.
Days turned into weeks. Every morning before work, Lisa and I drove to Howell Mill Road. Every evening after dinner, we returned. We didn't approach Neo, didn't try to pet him or feed him or force any connection. We just sat on that concrete floor and existed in his space. Dorothy called it presence without pressure. I called it the most exhausting thing I'd ever done. "The goal isn't to make him trust you," she explained during our second week. "It's to show him that humans can exist nearby without causing pain. That's it. That's the whole mission right now." It didn't feel like enough. Some days Neo stayed curled in his corner for hours. Other days he'd inch forward just a few feet before freezing and retreating again. Once he made it halfway across the visitation room before a door slammed somewhere in the shelter and he bolted back to safety, shaking so hard I could hear his nails clicking against the concrete. "Is this normal?" I asked Dorothy after a particularly brutal session. "This slowness?" She leaned against the doorframe. "For a dog with his history, this is fast. You should have seen him 6 months ago. He wouldn't even uncoil, wouldn't eat in front of people. Staff had to slide his food through a slot and leave before he'd touch it." I thought about that. 450 days. Most of those spent completely alone, afraid to eat, afraid to move, afraid of every shadow that fell across his kennel. "What happened to him?" Lisa asked quietly. Dorothy's expression darkened. "That's not my story to tell. Not yet." But her eyes said everything her mouth wouldn't. Whatever Neo survived, it was worse than anything written on that faded information card. Week 3, day 15 of our vigil. Neo stood up. Not to approach us, just to stand. His legs shook beneath him, whether from atrophy or fear I couldn't tell, but he stood there, facing us, for a full minute, before lying back down. Lisa cried that night on the drive home. "He's in there," she kept saying. "He's still in there." I held her hand and didn't say what I was really thinking, that being in there might not be enough to save him. Dorothy pulled us aside on day 18. "You've lasted longer than anyone," she said. "I think you've earned the right to know what you're dealing with."
We followed her to a cramped office, cluttered with adoption files and half-empty coffee cups. She closed the door behind us and sat heavily in her chair. Neo was surrendered by his previous owners, a family, husband, wife, 2 kids. From the outside, they looked perfect. Lisa tensed beside me. What happened? Dorothy pulled a thin file from her drawer. Animal control got called after a neighbor reported screaming. When they arrived, they found Neo locked in a basement. No food, no water, beaten so badly his back leg was fractured in 2 places. My stomach turned. The family said he was untrainable, said he'd attacked their children. When officers investigated, they found the kids were fine. Neo had defensive wounds, meaning he was protecting himself, Lisa said. They beat him and called it aggression. Dorothy nodded slowly. He spent 3 months in veterinary care before transferring here. The physical wounds healed, but the psychological damage? She spread her hands. That kind of betrayal doesn't just disappear. I thought about Neo's flinch at sudden movements, his terror at raised voices, the way he pressed himself into corners like he was trying to disappear entirely. That's why he growls, I said quietly, not because he wants to hurt anyone. Because he's trying to say, please don't hurt me, in the only language he has left. We sat in silence for a long moment. Then Lisa asked something that surprised me. Can I see him, alone? Dorothy hesitated, but something in Lisa's face convinced her. She led us back to the visitation room and nodded at my wife. 10 minutes. I'll be right outside. Lisa sat on the floor, closer to Neo's corner than we'd ever dared. He watched her with those hollow eyes, body tensed, ready to flee or fight. She didn't move, just extended her hand, palm down, fingers relaxed, and let it rest on the concrete between them. For 5 minutes, nothing happened. Then Neo shifted, slowly, painfully. He stretched his front paw forward, just an inch, and I saw it through the glass. A scar, thick and white, running diagonally across his paw pad, the kind of scar that comes from something sharp and deliberate. Lisa saw it too. Her breath caught. Oh, baby, what did you do to you? Neo's eyes met hers. For the first time, they didn't look empty. They looked exhausted, terrified, but somewhere beneath all of that, hopeful. And that tiny flicker of hope was more terrifying than anything else, because now I understood the weight of what we were attempting. He wasn't beyond saving, he was waiting to be saved. And if we walked away now, we'd be proving what 450 days had already taught him, that hope was just another way humans hurt you.
Neo's nose touched her skin, cold and wet and tentative. He sniffed once, twice, then, impossibly, pressed his head into her palm. Lisa's whole body shook with silent sobs. "Good boy," she whispered. "Good, brave boy." Dorothy appeared at the window, clipboard forgotten, mouth hanging open. In 450 days, Neo had never voluntarily touched a human, never sought contact, never trusted anyone enough to bridge that impossible gap. Until now. I slid a treat from my pocket, something Dorothy had suggested weeks ago that we'd never been able to use. Slowly, I extended it toward Neo, keeping my movements glacial. He flinched, but he didn't retreat.
His eyes darted between the treat and my face, calculating risk, weighing 450 days of pain against this single moment of potential kindness. Then he took it. His teeth were gentle, careful, like he was afraid of accidentally hurting me even while accepting something for himself. And as he chewed, something miraculous happened. His tail moved. Not a wag exactly, just a small, uncertain twitch, a muscle memory from a time before the basement, before the beatings, before he learned that hope was dangerous. But it was there, proof that somewhere inside this broken animal, joy still existed. Lisa looked at me through her tears, and I saw something I hadn't seen in 7 years of marriage. Not just happiness, connection. The void in our home, the silence between us, it was filled with something neither of us had expected to find. We'd been pouring weeks into earning Neo's trust, but in that fragile moment with his head in my wife's lap, I felt the weight of his 450 days crashing down. Like all those times you've been overlooked or shut down yourself, waiting for someone to see past the scars, even if it's not about a dog. If we quit now, he stays broken forever, and so do the stories like yours we're fighting for. Don't let that happen. Subscribe right this second to stand with us and prove love wins the long road. Then share in the comments a time you felt invisible and how you pushed through. It'll build our community and keep Neo's hope alive for everyone watching. Dorothy entered quietly, her eyes red. I've worked here 11 years. I've never seen anything like this. What do we do now? Lisa asked. Keep coming. Keep showing up. He's choosing to trust you, but trust is fragile. One wrong move. She didn't finish. She didn't have to. That night, Lisa fell asleep smiling for the first time in months. I lay awake, terrified, because now we had something to lose. And I couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest part wasn't behind us. It was waiting.
The shelter's adoption event fell on a Saturday. Dorothy warned us. Crowds, noise, chaos, everything Neo feared compressed into a single afternoon. She offered to move him to a quiet back room, but the paperwork got lost, and by the time anyone noticed, it was too late. I heard the crash from across the building. A table of supplies had collapsed. Volunteers shouted. Dogs barked in a chain reaction of panic that rippled through every kennel. And Neo broke. I reached his visitation room just as it happened. He was pressed into the corner, but not frozen this time. His whole body convulsed with terror. His eyes were wild, unseeing, trapped in whatever nightmare the noise had triggered. "Neo, hey, it's okay." I stepped forward without thinking. He lunged, not at me, past me, trying to escape, trying to flee, trying to get away from the walls closing in. His paw caught my forearm as he scrambled, claws raking skin, drawing blood. I stumbled backward. Lisa screamed my name, and Neo saw what he'd done. He collapsed in the corner, shaking so violently his teeth chattered. A high-pitched whine escaped his throat, the sound of an animal that knew it had just destroyed everything. Dorothy rushed in, but even her calm voice couldn't reach him. He was gone, checked out, retreated so far inside himself that his eyes went flat again, empty again, just like day one. "Jonathan, your arm!" "I'm fine." I wasn't fine. The scratch burned, but that wasn't what hurt. What hurt was watching 4 weeks of progress evaporate in 30 seconds. This is what I was afraid of, Dorothy said quietly. Setbacks like this. Some dogs never recover. The shame spiral takes over. They convince themselves they're exactly what everyone always said. Dangerous, broken, unlovable. Lisa knelt beside me, examining the scratch. It's not deep. That's not the point. I pulled away. The point is, maybe we're in over our heads. Maybe some damage can't be undone. I looked at Neo. He wouldn't meet my eyes. His whole body screamed defeat. Maybe his first family was right. The words tasted like poison, but in that moment, exhausted and bleeding and watching everything crumble, I meant them. Lisa's hand found mine. Do you really believe that? I didn't answer, because I didn't know anymore.
We didn't go back the next day, or the day after. Lisa didn't push. She knew I needed space. But on the third morning, she set a cup of coffee in front of me and said 5 words that changed everything. "He's waiting for you." I looked up. What? Dorothy texted, "Neo won't eat, won't move, just stares at the door like he's waiting for someone to come back." Her voice cracked. "He thinks we abandoned him, just like everyone else." The coffee turned cold in my hands. We'd come looking for something easy, a dog that was slotting neatly into our quiet life, fill the silence without demanding too much. But easy wasn't what showed up. What showed up was 450 days of pain, wrapped in fur and fear, and a desperate, fragile hope that kept getting crushed. "What if he scratches again?" I asked. "Then he scratches again. What if he never fully heals? Then we love him anyway." Lisa sat beside me. "Jonathan, we've spent 7 years playing it safe, avoiding hard conversations, choosing comfortable over meaningful. And where did it get us? An empty house and nothing to say to each other." She took my hand, the one with the healing scratch. "Maybe we're not supposed to rescue him. Maybe he's supposed to rescue us." I thought about Neo, alone in his kennel, starving himself because he thought we'd given up. I thought about 450 days of being told he was worthless, unapproachable, beyond saving. I thought about how one loud noise had undone weeks of progress, and how easy it would be to walk away. Easy, safe, comfortable, and completely wrong. "Let's go." Dorothy met us at the door, relief flooding her face. She didn't say anything, just led us to the visitation room and stepped back. Neo was worse than I'd ever seen him. His fur was matted with stress. His ribs showed more sharply. He'd given up. I sat on the cold floor, Lisa beside me. For an hour, nothing happened. Then Neo lifted his head, saw us, and something in his eyes shifted. Confusion, disbelief, a question he was afraid to ask. "You came back?" "Yeah, buddy," I whispered. "We came back." He stood on shaking legs, took one step, then another, until he was standing right in front of me. Then he did something I'll never forget as long as I live. He climbed onto my lap, pressed his head against my shoulder, and wrapped his front paws around my neck like a child holding on for dear life. A hug. This broken, terrified, unapproachable dog was hugging me, and I understood finally what 450 days of silence had really been. Not hostility, not aggression, not a dog too damaged to save, just a soul desperately waiting for someone willing to stay. I looked at Lisa. She was crying. I was too. "We're taking him home," I said. Dorothy smiled through her own tears. "I'll get the paperwork." The first time Neo saw Piedmont Park, he froze. Not from fear this time, from wonder. Grass stretched endlessly beneath the Georgia sun, birds sang, children laughed in the distance, and Neo, Neo, who had spent 450 days in a concrete cell, just stood there, nose twitching, taking in a world he'd forgotten existed. Lisa knelt beside him. "It's okay, baby. This is yours now." He looked at her, then at me, then back at the endless green expanse. And he ran. Not away from something, toward life. His legs pumped awkwardly at first, muscles remembering movement after so long, but then he found his rhythm and he was flying, ears flopping, tongue lolling, completely free. Lisa grabbed my hand. "Jonathan, look at him." I couldn't look anywhere else. 3 months passed. The matted fur grew sleek. The visible ribs disappeared beneath healthy muscle. The flinching faded, replaced by a cautious curiosity that grew bolder every day. He still had bad days. Thunderstorms sent him hiding under our bed on Peachtree Street. Loud voices made him nervous. Sometimes he'd wake from nightmares, whimpering, and one of us would have to sit with him until dawn. But more often, he was just a dog. A dog who stole socks and begged for table scraps and howled along with fire trucks and curled up between us every night like he'd finally found where he belonged. Dorothy visited one Sunday afternoon, bringing treats and happy tears. "I didn't think I'd ever see this," she admitted, watching Neo chase a squirrel across our backyard. "Dogs like him, the world writes 'em off, calls 'em broken, unapproachable, beyond saving." She turned to us. "But you saw what everyone else missed." Lisa smiled. "We just saw a dog who needed more time." "No," Dorothy shook her head. "You saw a dog who needed the right people. That's different. That's everything." That night, after Dorothy left and the sun set over Atlanta, I sat on our porch with Neo's head in my lap. His tail thumped lazily against the wood. His eyes were closed, peaceful, trusting. 450 days of silence, ended by patience, by persistence, by people who refused to believe the worst story the world told about him. Neo didn't just get adopted that day. He proved that being too broken or too shut down is just a story the world tells until the right people show up with patience. There are thousands more like him in shelters right now, waiting for someone to see past the fear. Don't let their stories stay in the shadows. Subscribe and join us in finding the next one who needs that long road to love. Hit the bell so you never miss when healing begins. Neo's scars hadn't disappeared. They never would. But they'd become something different now. Not reminders of what he'd survived, proof of what love could overcome. And somewhere across Atlanta, in kennels just like his, other dogs waited in silence, hoping someone would finally hear him.